All right, more George Washington as the theater of war has shifted south. And by the time the war had shifted south, it really stopped feeling like a revolution and it started feeling more like, like a feud or a civil war. And this came down to it not being about armies meeting in open fields anymore. It was actually, fighting among neighbors and families and people who had lived side by side for years. And now they were they were on opposite sides. Some supported independence, and some remained loyalists toward the crown. And most folks just wanted to live. They just wanted to survive, live out their lives. And this really made everything quite messy. You had raids on settlements and towns that replaced the battles, and you had retaliation that began replacing just typical strategy. Rumors would spread faster than orders, and homes would get burned, and property would be seized. And then old grudges from the past could just become these political weapons. And this wasn't something that Washington could control because he wasn't there. He couldn't play, he couldn't really police the loyalties that were taking place. He also couldn't stop any of the revenge that would take place once it started. And the war was starting to slip into something darker in the South. In the North, the fight had rules, but in the South, those rules faded rather quickly because you end up with the militias who are fighting without any uniform. Civilians would get caught in between the fighting. And then loyalty became something you had to prove over and over again. So Washington, through correspondence, he really understood the danger and that this revolution, any revolution that would turn inward could destroy itself, right? I mean, the cause could get lost. And the harder the fighting became, the harder it was to hold on to the unity of the idea of the cause. And yet, the revolution just kept on going. And because by this point, there was no real clean way out. They were in too deep. So there was only really a sense of endurance. You could really only have damage control at this point. And you only had the hope that something stable could eventually emerge from all this turmoil and chaos. And as the conflict turned inward, the revolution stopped being about just defeating the crown, defeating Britain, and it became about whether Americans could live with one another after everything had been done.